I'd like to call this meeting the Town of Boothbay Board of Selectmen to order. We had our budget workshop at 5:30. Unfortunately, nobody from the public showed up. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda, we have a couple of public hearings. First one is the General Assistance Ordinance, Appendix C, the housing maximums. Jim.
So this has become routine to the selectmen annually to adopt the maximums in which the General Assistance Ordinance is administered through. It's simply stating the amount of money that can be granted with the amount of money that can be earned. We do this annually. The process usually takes longer than the actual implementation. So we post in the paper that these maximums will be entertained. We have a public hearing, and then the selectmen entertain them and usually pass them into law. They've been on display. We're usually a little bit lagging in behind. These will take effect actually October 1. We've already administratively put them into effect. Now we just need to put them into law. Any questions?
October 12th.
October 1st.
Of 2012.
Of 2012. And these will take effect until the next ones come around September 30th, 2013. And annually they adjust them. We generally take the MMA recommendation and just adopt it.
I make a motion that we adopt MMA recommendations for the general assistance.
Motion's been made and seconded to accept MMA's recommendations for General Assistance Ordinance, housing maximums. Questions? Being none, all those in favor? Motion passes.
I have a signature sheet for you guys, if we can use that.
Gotta say, this is probably the quietest I've ever seen this bunch.
I heard somebody say once that, is there a complication that we approve these later than they actually enact? And the only time that would be an issue is if somebody challenged the maximums. There's an appeal process in the General Assistance Ordinance. If somebody appealed the maximum, which small, the margin of error is pretty small, so they don't usually change that much.
Next on the public hearings?
That's the only public hearing.
That is the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Next, we need approval of minutes of the previous meeting from January 14, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comments or corrections?
Read that well.
All those in favor? Motion passes. Public comment? Reports.
First, under reports, you'll see in your packets, under the head of St. Andrews Task Force, the commission study that the task force put together with iVantage, the full report is in your packets. It's 38 pages, is that what it, 36 pages. We also put it on our website because we realize a lot of people are going to be interested in it. So on the front page of the website, townofboothbay.org, there's a link. It's labeled iVantage Report, and that full commission study is there as well. Chuck, do you have anything that you want to go over with the task force?
Well, I think, as Jim said, we received the consultant's report. The report was done by iVantage Analytics and the Gabaro Group. We had asked them to look at the information that was presented to us back in July, as well as information that they've been gathered since then, and to also gather their own information and look at the healthcare needs on the peninsula. We had told them that if their conclusions were the same as what was presented to us by Lincoln County Health, that we would support that decision. What the consultants had said to us is that they do not support the conclusions. They feel that St. Andrews Hospital is a viable critical access hospital, and their recommendations is that Lincoln County Health and Maine Health totally reverse their decisions and bring back some of the services that have been shifted elsewhere. I hope you guys get a chance to read down through the report. It is a very good read. And it's easy to read and understand. There's summaries with each section. I'd be interested in your thoughts on it as well. Like Jim said, he posted it to the website, I think. So Register has it posted as well. We're still hoping to sit down with Lincoln County Health and Maine Health and continue the discussions that we've been having. We've been encouraged by the conversations, and we hope that they continue.
Have you haven't met to discuss this actual report with Lincoln County Health?
It was presented to Lincoln County Health this past Thursday morning. Ralph Gabaro was there to give them an overview of it. We are now waiting for their response.
A vote that keeps St. Andrews open would be a great response.
I don't know if you saw the press coverage that got Friday. Was that Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday that Don Kerrigan was up from Channel 6, WCSH, and he interviewed myself and Stuart Smith from the task force, as well as Patty Seabold and Tom Berry and Tom Hagan from the work group that were the hospital side work group. And I know he also talked to Jim Donovan from Lincoln County Health and got his response as well.
From what I saw in the Channel 6 coverage, Lincoln County Health looked a little dismissive, and so I'm not sure that this will have a lot of traction. On that topic, what was it, last week, a week before, I told the board that we had been invited to discuss with Lincoln County Health a contribution of some sort. All that came through that discussion, I went up and met with some of the leaders of Lincoln County Health and really gave them guidance on how a voluntary contribution would be made to the town. No other detail like what that would be, how long. I don't have any of that information. I just simply shared statute and policy as it pertains to the town. So I think they'll probably be in attendance within the next meeting or two to talk to the board about that. Any questions about the task force before I move on? Stand-in board vacancies. We have a vacancy on the planning board and 2 vacancies on the Board of Appeals. We've advertised those, but we've already gotten interest, and from 2 individuals on the planning board. I told them I would bring their information to you tonight, and I also told them that you might not be ready to entertain it until the advertisement has been out there for a couple of weeks, just so that it's equitable and people that are interested. Martin Page has has given me his information about his qualifications to be on the planning board. And Alex Rio doesn't have his information in the packet, but we've already talked about it. He's going to provide some information to the board at some point. And I told both of them that ideally the selectmen would like to see as many qualified people that are interested in these positions. The Board of Appeals, we haven't seen any traction, so I just appeal to the public any time. The Board of Appeals is a really interesting board to be a part of. It doesn't meet as regularly as the planning board, but when they do, it's a very interesting and deep-rooted topic as regards to the town and planning. So I don't know if you guys are prepared to move on these, but I'd recommend we wait until the next meeting when we had that ad out a little bit longer. In your packet is, well, it's the draft letter from the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals spent a lot of time on one particular case, the David Stimson case this year. And then they met just last week. And in meeting, they've generated a lot of interest in what's been currently going on in the town of Boothbay, and they've written this letter to the selectmen. This is not the signed version. I know they're just in the process of getting it signed. This will be the final version of the letter. But it's addressed to the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and me and Dan, and I wanted to get this into your purview as soon as possible. Any questions on the Board of Appeals letter?
They have received copies of the ordinance with changes, with proposed changes, I should say.
Yes, and the Board of Appeals is generally pretty supportive of the changes that we propose. There's always a little bit of, okay, I agree, okay, I disagree.
So at some point, do they plan, have you talked to any of them?
Yes, I did.
At some point, do they plan on going over it and maybe, chiming in?
I told them that the best avenue for them to weigh in is probably to comment individually as standing board members on what we've recommended to the planning board, so the planning board has as much comment on those proposed changes as possible. The same as I've told you guys, if some of these line up with what you think is the direction of the town, I think the planning board would like to hear that. It's hard to steer a ship when you've got one captain. Some people provide some navigation would help. Excuse me. I didn't put this as a header on there, but in your packet is the town meeting schedule as Bonnie puts it out. So you'll see nomination papers are going to be available at the beginning of next week. Obviously, there's a lot of elected official slots that are open other than just our selectmen, school trustees and such. Those will be available at the beginning of next month. So she does a pretty good job of outlining this, and we've attempted to do that in other formats for our budget process too. But there will be a selectman seat, a CSD trustee, CSD superintendent school committee member, a cemetery district trustee, and a water district trustee at large position. So
A couple of things about the sheet that was given with all that on it. There's only one selectman seat up the sheet.
I see that it says 2 and then it has one name.
And it has the right name.
It is.
My middle initials are.
I noticed that too. The next thing, this is I put it under reports, but I really just need guidance. The annual report, we're getting ready to put it together. We're collecting submissions for the annual report. The places that I need guidance that are just a little less clear to me is what do we want to think about for pictures for the front report, dedications, such as that. It was pretty easy last year. Bigelow was obviously their campus was coming into form, so we featured them on the front of the report.
What about the new rescue truck?
The rescue truck would make a good picture. We did put it on the back last year.
Oh, was it on the back?
Yeah. I thought that if we could get some kind of representative snapshot of what the task force has done for the back picture would be nice. And I'm not sure it's the feature of the front of the report, But, if that's okay with you guys, we can, because it is a snapshot in time of something that's happened this year. And we could probably lob that out to the task force to help us figure out what that looks like. And maybe that's the great place to recognize the volunteers. Maybe that's the dedication even. And I'm just thinking out loud. So I guess in the next couple of weeks, if something comes to mind, please bring it up. We'll be looking for them. And while I'm brainstorming out loud, I thought, maybe we could entertain a chance for business owners that are in Boothbay, principally owned in Boothbay, to maybe propose something to the selectmen. It would be nice to feature a business in Boothbay on the cover, kind of like we did with Bigelow. How you make that decision, I don't know. It's hard to make fair and equitable choices about who you would feature. But if you wanted to do something like that, we could start the wheels on that.
Also thinking of the dedications, we have to think of the in memoriams as well.
Yes. Cough drops. You'll see in your boxes that you get the Wharves and Weirs notice. Hopefully it was in your boxes today. Mine was on my desk today. That's the next report that I want to cover. Washburn and Doughty wants to put new ways in their buildings. The way they've been steering their boats into the water, they have to use a lot of air cushions and kind of get it on track. When they rebuilt the building, they didn't reseat the ways, so they're kind of crooked as per the building. So I talked to Bruce Doughty, and he said, the complications that they have is they obviously need to do the ways when they don't have a boat in the building. If you don't have a boat in the building, you're not making money. So they really try to, as little time as possible, to have a boat in the building. And maybe it's a ship. I don't know. I'll have to ask Bruce if I've got it right. But he discussed with me pretty nonchalantly the complications that it has, and DEP's been very, very good at hearing their complications, speeding up the process. But what our local law doesn't allow us to do is review their process while DEP and Army Corps is doing it. So what we've done internally is we've had our harbor master and our code enforcement go down there, get very familiar with the process, but they're not the reviewing authority. You guys and the planning board are the reviewing authority. And as per law, you really can't entertain that until Army Corps and DEP has done their review. Now, why would we accelerate this is in June, they're gonna have their boat go out and they'd like to do that repair then, but they need some kind of assurance that the process will be permitted before they start lining up contractors and stuff. So we've really done a lot to line them up to get a review in February. Matter of fact, we actually haven't received their application in full yet, but we've lined up this review. It makes sense for a Washburn and Doughty, a big business that you want to promote that has some historical links with the community. But what concerns me is the Wharves and Weirs that doesn't line up really clear cut with the community. If we don't accelerate the process, then we were kind of wrong. So then what I wanted to point out to the selectmen and to the planning board, and Dan's going to bring this up to the planning board, is we might want to consider someday having those parallel review processes, which we don't right
That
now.
would make so much sense.
We've talked about this before, and we wanted parallel review.
Right.
And we talked about being able to approve something contingent all of the approvals being gotten, and as soon as the last approval is gotten, then the town would sign off on it. I am a little nervous having a review before an application comes in.
Well, by law, they can't submit the application until they have Army Corps and DEP. And because we think this is going to be a slam dunk, we've lined up the public hearing process, and knowing that the review is coming in a week or two. We should, matter of fact, by the end of this week, we should have their application. But by law, our local law, we shouldn't start this process until then.
Well, that needs to be one of the things that's changed.
But the big problem is, once you make an exception for one, you have to make the exception for all. And, well, what you're saying makes sense. It isn't allowed.
Right, and we haven't done anything that is illegal in setting up the on-site, but we wouldn't do it out of practice in the future. I mean, if it was a less clear cut.
We can have a preliminary visit, but just as at any other on-site, no decisions can be made, no concrete assurances can be made. It can be looked at, but we're looking at it before we even get an application.
Right. Well, we've seen the Army, luckily we've seen the Army Corps review because it's filtered in, and DEP should be this week. So in this case, it's only a matter of weeks in which we'll get the review, but sometimes it can lengthen the process a month or two. And that's what we
Which
wanted to point out.
unfortunately is out of our control.
Is it out of our control, or is it just out of our control currently?
It's out of our control currently based on the zoning ordinance.
I
Our
understand.
Army Corps approval is out of our control. If it takes them months, that has nothing to do with the town of Boothbay. If we get to the point where we're looking at this concurrently,
Right.
and it can be approved contingent on the fact that all other approvals, that is within our control. If it takes them 1 month, 6 months, that's not within our control.
From the years that I've said on the board of selectmen, that's one of the things that it's a habitual, it just keep coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back. I mean, I would love to see that, at least so we can have it going and concurrent, we can have both reviews taking place, and everything contingent on the last one.
But we have done some of these concurrent in the past. The Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board have both looked at wharves and weirs at the same time to speed up the process.
Mhm.
It's the agencies outside of our control that we can't control.
I understand, I really do, but I mean, I still think we need to change the laws in this town, that we can do this all depending on the last review, whether it be the Army Corps or DEP or ourselves.
So I agree. If a state or federal agency says no to it after we said, hey, we don't have any problem,
Right,
then that's,
they override us,
yeah.
that's fine.
And when we were talking about this in-house, the code enforcement department, you look at what you need to build as a puzzle, and you need this piece, and then you need this piece, and those are all different areas of review. But really, the planning board's review and the Board of Selectmen's review is never contingent on what the Army Corps and DEP finds. But could it stop it? Yes. But you could look at that structure and say, the structure, okay, can and will be permitted if you get Army Corps review and DEP review, and you still have to submit it to the code enforcement officer to get the permit. It's not like you get the permit in advance. You get a conditional approval. You'll get the permit when Army Corps and DEP is submitted to the code enforcement officer.
Is this one of the proposals for the planning board to be looking at currently?
No, it isn't. We didn't put it in our review because we've talked about this since I've been here, in the couple of years that I've been here, about how it fits, and we've never had this glaring example of why this doesn't make sense, why it doesn't line up. But the Washburn and Dowdy case is a glaring example of why a conditional review wouldn't hurt the process.
If we get to the point where we're actually the first reviewing party and they put in their application and they've paid their fees, there also needs to be an understanding that if one of the outside agencies kills it, we're not renewing the fee.
And you'd have to review again. I think that's the condition that you'd put, is that conditionally approved or denied. Well, I guess conditionally approved, you wouldn't conditionally deny, but conditionally approved based on proof that it gets Army Corps review, DEP review, and nothing substantially changes in the application.
Yeah, and now I was going to say, being the devil's advocate, if they change something in the application, it has to come back to us
Right.
and the planning board, which means an increased time in
Right.
the whole process.
Look at your role in the ways for Washburn and Dowdy. What hindrances do you think there is to navigation for the ways for Washburn and Dowdy? There really aren't any. None that you won't see at the very beginning stages of the review. And nothing would change. So you could get that out of the way, and the proposed use, Washburn and Dowdy that wants to build this, would already have an assurance, okay, we've already checked with the selectmen, and as long as nothing changes in our design, we know we have approval.
Well, I would think, and I haven't seen an application any more than anybody else.
Right.
With Washburn and Dowdy, it's pretty cut and dried. There's only one way to get a ship out of their buildings.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna be able to change the direction or the site those ways at all. They have to be there. So that makes it pretty cut and dry, so nothing would change. However, on the average Wharves and Weirs application, that could change.
Right. And I think there's going to be a kind of a case-by-case basis, but if you make the law allow you to do that simultaneous review, it opens up a lot more options. Right now, we only have this option, A, B, C, D. You know, it is possible to do D before B in the case of Wharves and Weirs. Sometimes you may have somebody propose to do a structure that's this long and ends up with a float. And they might find in the process they have to change it. Well, they have to come back for review again.
And will that cost the applicant more money to have to come back?
And it would. And I think that's what you do. You just have to be upfront. You can get approved for this, but any changes substantially will have to be reviewed. But
The applicants are gonna balk at for having to pay more money because it's gonna be more expensive for them to have to go through the review process as well as lengthen it out. It's both sides of the coin.
Well, I think that you can, especially in the Washburn and Dowdy case, that the law gets in the way of moving it along fast, because the structure that needs to be permitted that have to go before the planning board it doesn't really mean much. The planning board is going to review it, but really they're talking about changing ways. Like it's a slam dunk, and your process is a slam dunk. But had we not noticed and had the conversation with Bruce Dowdy, it would take him another month, a month and a half to get this permitted. We moved it along because it made sense. I just wanted to put it on the radar screen. Excuse me. Under the heading of department heads, I think I gave you I already pointed out that there's typos in it, but I gave you the impact of the proposed state budget in an Excel spreadsheet. I sent that email a couple weeks ago now. I just wanted to reintroduce it in paper copy in case you do what I think happens to all my emails, they go right into the trash bucket. But we just want to make sure that the selectmen are cognizant of all the changes that are being proposed, even though we don't think that they'll be, that's the final draft of them. Other department head concerns that came up at the meeting, dog registrations are due at the end of the week. Matter of fact, before the end of the week. They're due before February 1st. The penalty for not registering your dog is $25, vice the $6 it actually takes to register your dog. So if you have dogs and they were registered last year, get in before Thursday, you can save yourself a lot of money. I know I had to do the same thing. I got my dogs registered today. Taxes are due in the middle of next week, second half taxes. So everybody that pays attention to our meetings, be cognizant of that. Next meeting, February 11th, is the public hearing for the February 26th question for the water district trustees that we've been talking about. I'm sure the water district will have representatives here to discuss during that public hearing. As I discussed earlier, nomination papers are going to be available February 8th. People that are interested in those elected official roles, be on the lookout for the availability of those papers. Assessment has just finished the turnaround document. What that means is they've taken all the sales over the last year and they've analyzed whether they make sense to the values. A really interesting breakdown that I will save for a day that Mike's in here so he can explain it, because it's technically pretty advanced, but it's really interesting to see how advanced our assessors are with breaking down data. They have all of the 35 to 40 sales that have happened in the last year, and they match them to the value, and they see how far they're off. It's really interesting. They're also actively looking at the forestry numbers, so people that have trees that are in tree growth and what value they have placed on hardwood and softwood. They're looking at that right now. That'll probably take them another month or so. They just finished up the Betty Better filing for all the local businesses that use Betty Better in the town of Boothbay. I don't think is a lot. I think Washburn Daddy has the largest account for Betty Better, but that was submitted. Code enforcement actually has 0 pending building permits, and the reason why that's substantial is because we were always backlogged a little bit, and we finally caught up. Board of Appeals had a recent meeting in which they entertained a variance for the Coburn House. And so they did approve a variance for the Coburn House to be used as a bed and breakfast by a vote of 4-0. On February 8th, Dan and the Code Enforcement Office has kind of brought to the forefront a contractor's class for erosion control. And when Dan was going through his certification, he recognized the fact that as of this year, you actually need to be certified in erosion control in order to do work. And he realized that none of our local contractors actually have that certification, so he's formulated putting on this class that they're going to have on February 8th. So contractors that do earthwork, you can get local training that you're going to need this year pretty easily. I spoke about the Wars and Weirs process, and then the ongoing planning board ordinance review. Code enforcement has a pretty active role in that. So that's all I have for department head reports.
Questions? Old business, tax foreclosures.
Excuse me. So I gave you the excerpt from the zoning ordinance, from the admin code. Again, just trying to reference that a lot because it's we haven't exercised it a lot in the last couple of years. In the list of the foreclosed properties. Additionally, I threw in, bless you. Additionally, I threw in a little bit more information too. There are 2 more properties that I would like to include in that list of property. They're previously foreclosed properties that I would like to add to the list that we consider for tax sale. One of them is account 558, 238 West Side Road. That account is in a repurchase agreement, but the repurchase agreement isn't entirely successful. I'd like to put it on the tax sale list, and hopefully that will encourage the person to get up to date with their repurchase agreement or face the consequence that it could be sold. The other one is account 2882, 682 Ocean Point Road, which was tax foreclosed a couple years ago and sat off of our tax rolls. Well, now the property abutter is interested in purchasing it from the town, but we haven't put it through the tax sale process. What I've told the attorney that represents it, Tom Tavener represents the property abutter, he wants to know, is the town going to entertain putting this on to a tax sale bid? Matter of fact, the property abutter wants to avoid the tax sale process and just buy it outright from the town. Reading the zoning ordinance, I don't think that's possible, or the admin code. I don't think it's
occupied right now.
It's not occupied. It's been unoccupied for a couple of years now. It really is just a trailer on a pretty nice piece of real estate, and I can understand why the abutter wants to purchase that. But I think it needs to go through the tax sale process.
Yeah, that's the only fair way.
It's spelled.
Yeah, no, I was reading that as well. I mean, even if you could, you gotta put everything up to bid.
I don't think there's any way around it.
Looks like you're giving a sweetheart.
Exactly.
So what I would like to propose to the selectmen is, now that you've had these for a couple of weeks, is to take all the properties that are on the tax sale list with those 2 that I've included in your packets and send them to Sally for review so that we can start the process.
So, what happens with them now?
What happens with
I
them now?
mean, we've got this list here that people either started and paid or haven't or whatever. I mean, at what point can they no longer come in and say, hey, I want to buy this. I want to pay my taxes up.
I would say to the very last day that you have a sealed bid in front of you and you're making the decision. I mean, if they come in June and you have the sealed bids piled up in there and they make a plea that I would like to do a repurchase agreement, at that point in time you could say we don't entertain any of the bids, we'll go with a repurchase agreement. The thing that's interesting about the way we've worded the admin code is it pretty much opens this window for the selectmen to make determinations if it goes down this path or this path. You tax sale it or you do a repurchase agreement. Or I guess the town could hold on to it for town interest.
So right now, what's the time frame of these, though, before they go to actually go up to bid?
You have to make a determination about whether you want to tax sale these before mid-March. So that's why we've put them in front of you to consider. And I know it's not always an easy decision, but I think the easiest thing is to consider all of them on the list of tax sale. And as people become more aware that their property is on the tax sale list, and you can see that in the admin code, there's a process that we send them notification, say you're on the tax sale list. I mean, they've already been really pelted with certified letters saying that they're going to go through this process. Now it's one more notification. The selectmen have decided to put this on the tax sale list, and you've got to respond in 30 days.
So this is 682 Ocean Point Road.
Yes.
Is that, it's been taking off the tax, I mean, they haven't been paying taxes on it.
Correct.
But that has not been through the process yet?
No.
So it's just been kind of sitting there dormant for a couple of years?
Correct. Yeah, it was.
What was the reasoning behind it? It's sitting dormant, we didn't see this last year.
You know, it wasn't a tax foreclosure last year either. It was the year before, which it probably wasn't on our radar screen. So it's actually, while we're doing the review of all the town-owned properties, it's one of those things that crept up, like, hey, we own this property too. So when you go, and this is, I've had a dialogue with one of the property owners, or I guess he's not the property owner, holds the private mortgage on one of the properties, and trying to explain to him how this works. The tax foreclosure process isn't like something we physically do, it automatically happens. So if you don't pay your property taxes within 18 months of when the lien takes effect, we automatically become the owners of it. And then after that happens, after the town goes through foreclosure, the selectmen then get a lot of authority on what can and cannot happen to the property.
All of these here, do we technically own now?
Yes.
Okay.
How optimistic are you that you can work out agreements with any of these folks? Realistic agreements?
I think account 3736, the private, like I've said, the private mortgage holder wants to get this property back in his interest, but he's not in town, he's not even in the States right now, and I told him that nothing's going to happen before March, and he's going to be in here in March. So that may come off the list. And then there's another one of them that's just a recurringly late process, and I think if you heated up the process, then it would probably turn into a repurchase agreement. But some of these other ones just have no interest. 2332, there's a lot of interest from the property abutter, wants to see this go to tax sale. So they're chomping at the bit to be able to buy this. Yeah.
Well, I think once we have them put on the sale list, then you will get whatever repurchase agreements there will be.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it makes sense to just put them on the tax sale list. Because then they're going to get another certified letter that says you're on the tax sale list. You not only have you lost your property, but you'll lose any ability to get it back if you don't respond in 30 days. That really is the key motivator.
Well, I think you have to just do it and be done.
And I know it's an unpleasant process and not something that selectmen want to do, but if you turn it into a business as usual, every year you entertain the tax sale list, you'll find that delinquent property tax payers will become more timely.
Hey Jim, what is this 100128? I mean, that doesn't amount to a heck of a lot at all.
Right. And in most of these cases, you don't see anybody foreclose on very valuable property. No, the property tax card is in your packets there.
That is actually property?
Yes.
Oh, right there, open right up. It's taxed at $6,600.
And usually, it's not the town's interest to actually make money out of the tax sale. You just want to get it back on the tax rolls. Yeah, appraised land value $6,600. It's not very much.
No.
Undeveloped land.
0.02 acres?
Yep, 871 square feet. And, that's one of those cases where the property abutters will probably be the only ones that have interest.
Yeah, what it says.
No, the property abutters, that actually has value to it. They can add it to their main lot with like nearly no tax impact. So sometimes it makes sense for property abutters. And I think that's something that we need to entertain in the long run, is that our admin code doesn't really represent the interest of property abutters who are going to have less tax impact. They're not going to use as many services because they already own property. So it might be in the best interest of the town to make sure they have a little bit better of a representative process in the tax sale process. I don't know, but you might want to consider it. It might take care of itself, so considering some properties only make sense to property abutters.
Square feet, that's almost smaller than my house.
Yeah, I don't.
By 40 is 800.
I don't know how we could sort it out. I don't know how those boundaries got made. And truthfully, until we have our attorney review some of these taxes, we won't know some of the intricacies that are involved. Sometimes they have federal liens involved. But we wouldn't invest time and effort in the process if we didn't think the selectmen wanted to push them towards tax sale.
So you need a motion to pursue all these accounts?
I think if you consensually want us to push them towards tax sale, we can have Sally review them and we can save a motion for later. But I don't want to invest a ton of time and effort and money in getting them prepared for tax sale if that's not the intent of the selectmen. Essentially this is the time where you'd say, hey, that property makes sense for the future public park, and you just pull it out. Or
we got land like that already. We got 2 pieces. We gotta get rid of those.
Yeah, that's not part of the tax foreclosure process.
I know, we required it by taxes when
Yeah, and then the town voted to keep it.
when the town does vote and get rid of it too.
And I don't think we'd win that one
I
either
think
of
we
us.
will, I think we will.
But that's a debate for another day.
I mean, they ain't done nothing, just sitting there. 17 acres, when we don't need to be holding on 17 acres of land.
This is a good time to, as you're pushing these forward, we're still doing the inventory. I mean, it's got pushed back because of all the other things we're doing. We haven't had as much time, but it's a good time to inventory town properties. But if you guys consensusly agree that we can push these forward, It's not like it's the last chance you'll
Do
get.
you have any other choice?
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve.
We have to.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Nobody wants to potentially take someone's home up from under them. But the law is the law.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's spelled out pretty black and white. I mean, it's a lot more black and white than it used to be years ago, and that's why it's in the ad.
And we're not even making an effort for buyback unless the pressure comes. So
Right.
it's the finality of it that
And one of the purposes of the admin code is to give them up until the last minute
Right.
to redeem that property.
Now, as for the Ocean Point Road property, what's that, 682? I told him I would kind of introduce it to the board today, but I just don't see any other avenue other than tax sale process.
As an official tax acquired piece of property, it has to go through the same process.
Is that the one up on top of the hill?
Yeah, yeah, it's just prior to the, yeah, I'm trying to think if I can nail down the exact location where,
Have Sally look at it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what we're gonna do, is we would have Sally look at the tax card, a little bit of deed research, and she's gonna give it the move forward. And if there's any red flags that pop up, that we'll entertain them then.
Okay, let's move the piece down. I know the here about
We're all-
Right before the dip there, that's where that is, on Ocean Point Road.
that. Yeah. It's Thrill Hills.
Thrill Hill, that's the, I was looking for the,
Shit.
Yeah, go have a look across there, go ahead now. Choo, I'm going. Choo. Now, go.
well, that's, I'll start the review then.
And you'll still try to work out repurchase agreements while the review's going on.
Always, we will always talk to a property owner about the opportunities that they have. As a matter of fact, the one on the top of the list, I think we're gonna have some discussions with later. And it may involve the selectmen, because you guys have all the authority, but it's a complicated
I was
situation.
gonna say that one seems quite complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. But I've assured them that nothing will happen prior to March. And according to our admin code, nothing will happen prior to March. It might get advertised, but no sale will happen.
Could we, this is strictly speaking hypothetical, but if someone owed $500 in debt to keep it out of just this round, and we know by looking at the tax thing that next year they're gonna owe another $1,000, say, could we make that as a term of allowing it not to go to sale, that they pay all the way to current?
We already, when we go to a repurchase agreement, all we simply do is we take the back taxes owed, figure out what the future taxes would be for the next year, because it's not going to be back in the tax roll, lump it up, break it into payments. We actually, we put no administrative fees in there. It's literally the back taxes and the property taxes in the next year.
As long as they're paying.
And if they pay on time, we eventually will end up in a quitclaim deed back to them, which we've done successfully on a couple this year. And the only one that we don't have that's working successfully is in this stack here.
Anything else? New business, local plumbing inspector appointment.
So I bragged so much about how Dan has got all the certifications, but I forgot to ask for an appointment as the LPI. He is our LPI, but he needs that appointment for me.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to appoint Dan Ryer Jr., the local plumbing inspector for the town of Boothbay. Questions? All those in favor? Motion passes. Next under new business, fiscal year 2014 budget process.
I'm completely satisfied with the workshop that we did earlier, and if we pick up our workshop at 5:30 next meeting, I think we're way on track. We'll probably be ahead of pace. It'll give us more time to focus on the large issue topics, the big issue topics.
All right. Public comment? I'll entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
That was quick, then.